types of companies have you seen are launching onto that idea of a retreat or a branded
Yeah.
experience?
So far it's been a little bit varied. So a lot of people in the heart-centered coaching industry. So that's one big niche. And then it's also been, some of the smaller business owners. I'm doing one with a business that works with retired athletes
Hmm.
and they kind of helping those athletes figure out what's next. And they're using retreats for that.
Okay.
A lot of people in kind of the med spa, the non-insurance kind of medical stuff are looking at doing retreats, to help grow their business for their clients. So they're somewhat varied. But I would say probably, the coaches, coaching, whether it's business coaching, life, some type of coach is so far the biggest area. Although, like I said, I've talked to a couple of people about corporate retreats too, where they're more of a team building as opposed to a business growth.
Welcome to the Turbo Branding Show, where we help you ignite your growth by leveraging your brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. I'm your host, Sue Kirshner, and today I'm welcoming Lori McDowell to the show. So let's jump in and turbocharge your brand. First, thank you so much for being here, Lori.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk with you about your journey, your brand, and then really dig into experiences and how you can use experiences to build your brand. So, but first, let me talk a little bit more to the listeners about who you are, Lori, and why you're the perfect branding to talk about these kinds of experiences. So, Lori likes to say she traded chemical reactions for human ones, which is interesting. With a PhD in chemical engineering, she spent years studying catalysts. But now she is the catalyst, guiding business owners to spark extraordinary growth through Done-For-You Transformational Retreats. So you can think of her as a retreat chemical engineer. She handles the logistics, the planning, and design, so leaders enjoy the reactions they desire from this event: deeper loyalty, stronger connections, and new revenue without extra work. Her mission is to help people create extraordinary businesses and extraordinary lives fueled by gratitude, purpose, and impact. I love that. How long did it take you to put that together? Because I know it takes,
Well,
I'm still reiterating mine.
I know I change it all the time, but between, Chat GPT and someone gave me the idea because I was using Doctor. At first I wasn't using Doctor, then I was using Doctor, and I'm like, I just don't think I like Doctor. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, what if you took your chemical engine? I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
No,
fun,
I
a little
love
bit
that.
different.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way it differentiates you. So, and I am a huge proponent of branded experiences, and I've always wanted to host my own retreat. So I'm excited to dig in here and learn more about you. And like I said, how retreats can help companies strengthen their brand. So let's start. Tell us about your journey to get here, because obviously we're all intrigued by the chemical engineering aspect and how you've pivoted.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I was working as a chemical engineer and, I was in a job where things changed and I just didn't want to be there anymore. So I ended up leaving. It wasn't my choice when to leave, but it worked out perfectly. It was exactly what I needed. And I decided I didn't want to work for anyone else ever again, that I was going to do something on my own. And came in like completely new. A lot of people have say, oh yeah, my parent was an entrepreneur, or I didn't have anybody who all I knew it really was corporate. So when I jumped into this, like a lot of new business owners, I thought I'm going to serve everybody and give them, I'm going to coach all these people and help them take all my knowledge. And I didn't even know, that a brand meant anything. I just kind of jumped in and, I ended up finding, I wrote a book and that book kind of was my journey to starting my own business. But
Okay.
when I went to build a website, I looked up, the title of the book and all that stuff, and it wasn't available. So I kind of picked my company name based on what URL was available.
Yeah, which sadly a lot of people have to do. Yes.
Yeah, so and decided I started my journey as a coach, and I was like, okay, well, I know corporate people, so I will coach corporate women who are ready to leave or unhappy. Yet I didn't really niche down enough and I didn't do enough work. And I found that it also wasn't really what I enjoyed. So I looked at, what are the things that I love? What are the things I'm good at? And what are the things that people could benefit from, and came up with the concept of done for you retreats, which is what I do.
Yeah.
So it's not just that I host retreats or I help you plan retreats. I will plan your retreat, attend your retreat, facilitate your retreat, and really help you take that retreat and turn it into a branded experience for your clients, your team, your people, so that they're ready to, buy whatever you offer and be loyal to you and just want to come back and work with you again and again.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I'm assuming you've had some great response from launching. And what types of companies have you seen are launching onto that idea of a retreat or a branded
Yeah.
experience?
So far it's been a little bit varied. People that, there are a lot of coaches that want to do that. So a lot of people in the heart-centered coaching industry. So that's one big niche. And then it's also been, some of the smaller business owners. I'm doing one with a business that works with retired athletes
Hmm.
and they kind of helping those athletes figure out what's next. And they're using retreats for that.
Okay.
A lot of people in kind of the med spa, the non-insurance kind of medical stuff are looking at doing retreats, to help grow their business for their clients. I've even got someone who I'm talking to, we haven't done it yet, but who owned a number of tattoo shops. So they're somewhat varied. But I would say probably, the coaches, coaching, whether it's business coaching, life, some type of coach is so far the biggest area. Although, like I said, I've talked to a couple of people about corporate retreats too, where they're more of a team building as opposed to a business growth. So,
Got it. Got it. No, that's interesting. That's exciting. So we'll get back to retreats because I want to pick your brain a little bit more about how to do them and how to fill, the seats and all this kind of good
right.
stuff. But I'm intrigued about what you said a little bit in your personal journey about, you know, how did you move from uncertainty about your message to the crystal clear brand identity of your, extraordinary life? Because it's a hard thing for a lot of us to do. And I've done several iterations of my brand and, how I describe what I do and things like that. But can you tell me a little bit about how you knew it wasn't working? And then what process did you take to finally get to where you're at? Did you bring in outside perspective? Was it just introspective? I think it's always fascinating to see how people get to where they need to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I did get some outside help. I actually heard someone speak about branding at a summit I was talking on. I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting idea because I knew you can tell it's not working when, you're talking about it and you can tell like people are almost confused. Like they're really just not, when you've talked to someone or you've met someone or someone's been on your website and they're still kind of like, so what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like there was no clarity. And I realized that it's that, my message was so broad or so general that it didn't resonate with anyone. It just, it was it's kind of like, if someone says eat healthy, it's like you could say eat healthy, but that doesn't tell anybody how to eat healthy. It's just too broad. So working with, some people who were experienced in it, I kind of was told or was shown that really, what's important is to look at who you want to serve and then look at, what are the words they use? What are they looking for? How do they self-identify? How do they see themselves? And trying to get my brand, to focus on what people are looking for, but also what was the outcome of it. And you're right, it goes through a lot of iterations. I mean, I've changed it, as I changed what I'm doing, when I started my brand, my work on my website and such, I was coaching women, corporate women,
Yeah.
and I moved off and then started doing the events and the retreats. So I changed a little bit, but yet my brand really didn't change because it was still the same goal, the same. One of my enemy is kind of that mediocrity that I'm okay, I'm good enough, good is good enough, or I'm not miserable, so I guess I don't deserve anything better. So
Yeah.
that's where I came up with your extraordinary life, in that, no, good enough is not good enough. And it's, we all have extraordinary in us, whether, in our business, in our lives, and that it's worth finding it. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a process, but getting the clarity, getting the right words, and really painting a picture is what I found was really valuable, where someone can, hear me talk or see something I wrote and say, oh, that's me. Maybe I want that.
Yeah. No, I I'm so happy that you've said all of these things because it's a lot of what I end up preaching to people that I talk to as well. But it's like, niching down is very helpful. Small business owners, coaches, solopreneurs, we only have so much time, energy, and resources to market ourselves. And if you know exactly who you are trying to target, it makes it so much easier. And like you talked about the clarity piece of it, is how to you get clear on who you are and what you do well, but you also get clear on who you want to serve, right? In terms of what their needs are and things like that. So I like that you mentioned that. And then I love, love, love that you mentioned your brand. You can pivot in the way that you message or even in the way that you deliver, your service offering or your product or something, but the brand doesn't change, right? It's what
Mhm.
makes up your DNA, what makes up your passion, what's the promise that you make to people. And so I like that you recognized that is that the brand hadn't really changed. It's just the execution or the offering of how you're going to deliver on that brand promise changed a little bit. So,
Yeah, I think that, and that surprised me at first because when I changed what I did, I was like, oh, do I have to change everything? And then I thought about, I don't really, because it's still, there are a lot of different ways to get an extraordinary life, which is my brand. It doesn't have to
yeah.
be, it could be coaching. It could be, I mean, really, I can do hundreds of things aimed at that and still keep the same brand. So, and
Exactly. Yeah, the
yeah,
promise you're making is I'll help you find an extraordinary life, and it's still absolutely valid depending on, what you're doing. So, all right. You mentioned something to me when we were talking, about how, I'm building a brand that feels alive. It's one that grows alongside me with purpose and possibilities and things like that. And I love the way you express that. So I was wondering if you could just, expand a little bit more on that. What does it mean to have a brand that feels alive?
I think it's a little bit that when you hear the brand, you kind of form a picture in your mind of what it is for you. And then everybody's picture is different, but it's still something like you like, oh, I want that. I can see that and I want it. And, for some people, it might be they hear my brand and think, okay, I want to retire and live on the beach. For other people, it's like, I want to have 1 million followers. But you see it and you draw that picture in your mind about what it is. And that's what kind of makes it alive because it's kind of something you can actually visualize and look at something like, oh, I can picture myself, put myself in that picture. So.
Right. That's like the power of vision boards, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of coaches, a lot of consultants that use vision boards. And, I used to, with some branding partners that I had in the past, we used to create this like future vision tool, which is that we would create a magazine article that was like 5 to 10 years out in the future that talked about the company living its brand to its fullest. And by, being able to show them, create a story, create a visual of what that could possibly look like. Number one, it creates an emotional connection. But then number two, it gets everybody on the same page to say, I see where we're going. I see what the end result is, what the end goal is. So there's so much power in visualizing and helping other people visualize where you can help them get. So want to talk a little bit now about retreats. So,
Sure.
because that's intriguing. I love these idea of experiences. And, I know there's probably a myth out there too about, oh, they're so expensive or oh, they're such a pain, and which is obviously why you're capitalizing on this feeling that's out there. But there is no better way to create a relationship with your clients or prospects than if you're in front of them face to face or in a group and talking to them and sharing an experience that you both can refer back to. So tell me a little bit more about the power of retreats as an experience versus something else they could do.
Right. Yeah. What a retreat does, as you mentioned, Sue, the power of being in front of someone and spending time with them, especially in a small, close connection where you really get to know them, is so important. I mean, it makes your clients wanna, at the end of a retreat, they almost want to buy whatever. They don't even care what you're selling because they're buying you. They want to be there. So that's part of it. But the other thing is the retreat can really be it's not just a nice vacation or a nice, a place to do it. But if you design it right, you can actually take your clients, your prospects, whoever you're holding for, through a journey where you actually, are figuring out where they are and where you want them to go and have everything kind of leading them that way. So that's why it's really a great experience, because it's kind of like, it's like if you write a book, you can take someone from a book, but that's not as, you don't touch them when they read the book. This is kind of like, you do that in 3 or 4 days and you kind of take them through that. And when a person, at a good retreat, a person will actually leave changed. They'll be a different person than when they came. And when you do that for someone, you just have that connection that helps build your business. They want more of that and they want to tell their friends and they want to come back again and again. So it's really easy to grow and scale your business through retreats.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that because there's a big difference between, like you were talking about, let's say you go to a conference, right? And we were,
Mm-hmm.
you're at the conference, you're listening to all these wonderful people speak, they're sharing all this knowledge and wisdom with you, but you're always in a hurry to get to the next speaker, get to the next workshop, get to the next conference. And then, like you said, you go home and then you're supposed to do something with all of that information. Whereas, like you were talking about with the retreat, is there's a start and an end goal, right? And it's not just to be there, it's to actually experience something and to build connections and to build memories. So tell me a little bit about how do you, because you help people with the content of their retreat too, right?
Right.
So how do you counsel them and say what is actually achievable
Right.
in a retreat? Or how do you help them walk through the process of figuring out what's our journey? How are we going to get them from A to B?
Yeah. The first thing I usually do is I'll work with the person as an individual, as that person. What is your vision? What is your purpose? What is your why, your values? And then, so first, once they know that we figure out, okay, based on that, that starts the process of what kind of retreat are we going to have. And then after we know what your values are, what your whys are, it's like, okay, where do you want to bring the client? Like, what is the transformation, the end result you would like from the retreat? And based on those two things, we work together and I figure out, and help them figure out, okay, how long should it be? How much should it cost? What type of environment? Because depending on what the values are and the transformation that they want, it may make more sense to do it in the mountains. It may make sense to do it in a city. It may be a place where, you may want more activity. You may want less activity. So everything goes down to figuring out the purpose of the retreat and what's important to you, what your why is, and having it all go there. And then once that's done, then we get into like the details of like, okay, what your clients want to pay $2,000 or $10,000? What type of thing what do you want? Do you want a week or do you want 2 days? How long? And then we figure that out, we book it, and that's when we start working on the actual agenda then. So to match that, we'll figure out, okay, there's usually like, okay, the beginning is like the get to know you, the meet, the see where you are today. And then you kind of like take steps to getting to where you want to go. So the whole thing is designed with that in mind. And there's lots of time and space to integrate to. Like you want to have time where people aren't running around doing stuff, time to just sit and, stare at the water or sit and think about what happened.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is there some kind of formula, and there's probably not, it's all custom, but is there a formula about, yeah, do you give them that time to just reflect, to just, instead of waiting for them to go home and, say, okay, now I'm ready to think about it because it was bam, 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 one activity after
Right.
another. Now you're saying, wait, I just told you something important. Let's stop and let's think about it. So is there, do you find that, it's like 60-40, 70-30, or really it just, again, it's all
Yeah.
custom, just
you
depends.
know, it is custom and it depends, but in general, like if you have a 5 day retreat, I think it's really important to have one day that's off. That's
Hmm.
just no activities. And maybe it's not a full day, maybe it's a morning one day and an afternoon another day, but have time that's just open for them to, whether explore or do something. So, and if it's a short, if it's 2-day retreat, maybe you give one afternoon off. But if it's 7-day, you might do 2 days off. But you
Right.
give people time where there's not programming, where they can either go off on their own, or they can do small groups, or they can just relax. The other thing that I think are really helpful is one, having a pre-retreat meeting to help get people excited, to help them meet the other people that are going to be there, and just
Okay.
kind of like, talk about what's possible, what they're looking for. And then you always want to have something for them to do next, because the biggest, you go to a conference and then you leave and most people forget. But, even if you're selling a program, I mean, a retreat is a perfect way to move into a mastermind or a group coaching program or something else. And so that's, great if you're selling it. But even if you're not selling something, if the retreat is like fulfillment or a team building,
Yeah.
you want to have some kind of a follow up, like, hey, let's have monthly calls, for the next 6 months, just so we can kind of keep in touch. Let's have the next retreat ready so that they're ready if they want to do it again. But you kind of want to keep it on an ongoing so that they don't feel like, okay, this was amazing, and now I'm going home and it's like over.
And it's over. Right. No, I like that. I like that. Because, yeah, you want to make sure that you can extend that experience as long as you possibly can. Like you
Hmm.
said, whether it's because you're going to try and upsell them to another program or, you've made this transformation, now this would be the next transformation kind of a thing
Right.
that you would need to do. So, excuse me. Tell me a little bit about the hardest thing I've found in the past. How do you get people in the seats, right? How do you get them to attend? What are some of the best practices in terms of, I know you obviously need you need compelling messaging to tell someone what they're going to get out of it, but any tips or best practices you can share about how do you market these?
Right. Yeah, definitely, a clear message and something compelling. You want to make sure that people know that this is for you and that this is what you're going to get from it. So you definitely want to have a clear message, and it helps to have a great location or something that, attracts people. But then the other thing that I think is really important is to have well, two things. I say one is to have kind of a quick win, something that they can take away with them immediately. Like, I've done a retreat for a woman who was a ghostwriter, and I'm doing another one with a publisher. And we're actually, like, the ghostwriter, people actually, while they were at the retreat, worked on their books. So they left with, more, something done. For the woman who's the publisher, we're actually going to have this retreat where people will actually leave with a compilation book done, because they're going to give a talk on this topic. The talk will be transcribed and the book will be done. I mean, they won't have it the hard copy, but they'll have an ebook by the end of
Okay,
the 4 days. They're going to leave with headshots. They're going to leave with, a speaker reel. So they will have some kind of a quick win to take with them. And I think that's really compelling. The other thing that I think really helps is to have kind of a community give back as part of the retreat. Like, we
okay,
just did a retreat in Fiji, and in that one, we went to well, first off, 10% of the retreat fee went to this orphanage. And then while we were there, spent an afternoon, we went to this orphanage and we played with the kids, and they told us what they wanted to be when they grow up. And they showed us around their house and we
yeah,
danced. And that was the most memorable part. I've done another retreat where it was a team building retreat. And as part of the exercise, we had the teams had to have a competition at building bicycles. And then we took those bicycles and we had some kids come in and gave the bicycles to kids who had never had a bike before. So having some kind of give back as part of it is also really important, because one, it makes people feel like, okay, I'm not just doing something for myself, but I'm doing something good for someone else,
right.
which is a really compelling reason to go. So those
Absolutely.
two things I think help fill it. And then really, the other thing I like to do is, because I am a coach and I do like timeline therapy. So we will actually take them into the future and see the retreat after it's done and see the retreat full, and kind of lock that in their subconscious so that they already have it coming as they're filling it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that. So very
Yeah.
cool. No, I like that. I like that about giving back and making, your investment in this retreat as a participant is more than just transforming for yourself. It's also
Mhm.
transforming for someone else. So let me ask you too, because I know obviously you can hold retreats wherever. Does it have to be an exotic location? And or if it's going to be a week long because that's what you need for the transformation, then does it have to be an exotic location?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be an exotic location. It should be a different location. Like I know some people do host retreats in their house. They have a nice house and they'll host retreats in their house.
Okay.
And that's fine, but I think, that's great. I mean, for the participants, that's okay. But I think it should take you out of your everyday.
Right.
So, you want to do something that creates a space that's a little bit different because that different one, it breaks like the monotony of every day. It changes up what you're doing. So like just having a retreat in a conference room doesn't really kind of, some people do it. The activities are great, but if you could have a retreat in a conference room, but you want to get people out of the conference room at least for part of the retreat and doing something.
Right.
But just having, they don't have to be exotic. I mean, you can do a retreat, in an Airbnb that's got a really nice backyard or something, that's a little
Right.
bit different if
Right.
you have to, or you go to a lake or a river, that's in the town where you live. It doesn't have to be, Fiji or the
Fiji.
Caribbean. Now,
Right.
if you can, I mean, I love those retreats because sometimes they are a little bit, you know, in some ways they're harder to fill because typically they cost more and they are more of an investment, but they're also easier to fill because people say, "Oh, I always wanted to go there. Why don't I get that retreat while I'm there?"
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. So, in your experience, I'm just going to ask you one last question here because it's fascinating. But so, for in your experience, because I know you host your own retreats for
Mhm.
your own coaching business and stuff, what works the best for reaching people? Is it having almost like webinars where you get to really talk and explain what's going on? Is it someone that, it's people you already have a relationship with and you're just sending out an invite via email? How does that work between people who know you and maybe trying to reach people who don't know you for like best marketing tactics?
Right. Yeah, I would say, first off, start with getting a few people who who want to go. So before you like put any kind of, commitment, have a couple people that are already in.
Yeah.
Once you have some people in, that helps, you justify this is going to be a good event. So like I typically tell people, first off, we try to make the retreat profitable or at least break even. If you're aimed for say 12,
Hmm.
we want to make sure that you're not going to lose money if you have six. So we want to make it,
Right.
so that you don't have to get it. But then the first person is getting people, whether you're raving fans or people you already know, try to get a few people in it quick. And then prepare, have something, a funnel or a page where people can get a lot of information that they may just see it and sign up. But in general, it does require personal contact, whether that's speaking to people or reaching out to people. A lot of times people will express interest through something they see or hear, but then a phone call really does help,
Yeah.
or, a personal email with a follow up. That personal contact does help people want to come as opposed to, you may get a couple people that just see it online and say, oh, I want to go to that. But in general, it's more, who do you know? Who do they know? Who has seemed, reaching out to people who seem like they might be a good fit,
Hmm.
asking people to bring someone with them,
Bring a friend.
especially
Yeah.
bring a friend. Yeah. And that's one thing I like that, especially if it's a retreat that's more of a fulfillment retreat for people who are already your clients or your team, is to try to make a way where they can bring a friend at a discount or something, because then it's kind of one of those interesting events that can be fulfillment and lead generation at the same
At the
time
same
if you get new
time.
people in it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that. Well, thank you. This is wonderful. This is fantastic. So, yeah, it has definitely, sparked a desire in me to kind of set up one of those because I've always wanted to have a retreat where it was like, hey, let's work on your brand for, 3 to 4 days and really just nail everything down that can't be done necessarily in a couple-hour workshop here and things like
Right. Yeah.
that.
No,
So,
I mean, that's a great thing. And as I'm thinking that, you say a location, something like that. I mean, I could see doing that someplace like, even New York City, and actually having like part of the area, like, let's go look at some of these brands, let's go see
yeah.
some of the signs or something like that. So you can, it doesn't have to be exotic or tropical, or it could be just something that, pick a city, really any
Yeah.
city,
Yeah.
kind of find a hotel or something and go look at the brand. I mean, you could even do tours, look at the Hilton. What does that brand say? Look at the,
Absolutely. No, I like that. That's intriguing. Yeah, or let's go look at your competition. Let's go see what
Mm,
they're doing and what's
right.
missing and things like that. No, that's no,
Yeah.
you've sparked ideas for me. I'm excited. So, well, let me ask you one last question that I ask everyone on the show, if you don't mind. I'm absolutely all about honoring small businesses who are doing a really good job with their brand. Is there a small business that you can think of that you think does a really good job with their brand, or just a company that you know of that you're like, oh, I would be so devastated if they went out of business?
Yeah. I don't know how small they are. I'm trying to think. One of the companies that I would hate if they went out of business because I love their products is Ninja.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, like I have a Ninja coffee maker and a Ninja air fryer, and it's kind of like for me, they work well, they do really cool things, but yet they're not super expensive, or and I think their brand kind of, shows I mean, a Ninja, you think they're kind of like stealthy but versatile. They get, things
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So that's something that came to mind.
Okay. I like that one. No, that's excellent. Very cool. Well, good. Well, I am so pleased that you were able to come on today, and thanks for spending time with me and sharing your adventures in building your brand as well as using retreats as a way that other people can build theirs. So, if after listening to this podcast, if people are looking for help to create their extraordinary life, or they're like, I want to go ahead and do a retreat, how can they reach you?
Sure. The best way is probably through email. It's L McDowell at reimagine you, the letter U, L McDowell at reimagine you. Reimagine You is my company. I actually have my website's kind of under construction, so I don't send people there just yet, but it
Yeah.
will be yourextraordinarylife.net will be the website. And right now it's a link tree, so it does have everything there. So yourextraordinarylife.net is another way to find me.
Okay. Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lori. I am so excited to have people listen to this, and hopefully you will get some people who are raising their hands saying, I want to do a retreat. So, yeah,
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, this was great. I enjoyed talking with you. And yeah, if you want to do a retreat, there's so many possibilities, and it doesn't have to be difficult or expensive or any of that. So
good to
thank you.
know. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you again. And thank you, listeners, for joining us for this episode of the Turbo Branding Show. I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. And if you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could help me build a strong brand following for the show. So please share this episode and be sure to like, subscribe, and review. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next show.